Are you talking shift? We are. It's time for the We're Talking Shift podcast. Now. Here to talk shift, Loree Bischoff. We're Talking Shift.
Hello, everyone. I'm Loree Bischoff. Welcome to We're Talking Shift, where my guest du jour and I talk shift because the antidote to feeling stuck begins in our minds with a shift in our thinking. And that shift often means that you gotta go rogue. You've got to take some action. At some point, the guests that I interview have gone rogue and made a shift that altered the course of their life. Talking about those radical shifts and how they ultimately changed their lives for the better is what I am super passionate about sharing with you, in the hopes that you too will be inspired to go rogue when you need to make some shifts happen in your own life. For me, physical, spiritual, and emotional fitness has been a major focus of mine for over 30 years now. So I love having guests on who share this passion and want to share their journey and what's worked for them with you. So today is part one of my interview with a very special guest. Her name is Jennifer Gimenez. Jennifer is an actress. She's a reality TV celebrity, a supermodel who's graced the covers of about every major fashion magazine that you can conceive of. She's appeared in music videos for people like Tupac Shakur, Prince, Mick Jagger, a host of others. Her films include Blow with Johnny Depp, Vanilla Sky with Tom Cruise and Charlie's Angels, Full Throttle with Cameron Diaz, Drew Barrymore and Lucy Liu, among others. She's appeared as the sober living house manager for the VH1 reality TV series Sober House, which is a spinoff of the Celebrity Rehab with Dr. Drew show. And I think she appeared there as a rehab technician at the Pasadena Recovery Center. If you're a fan of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, you also saw Jennifer there. I think seasons 2 through 5 she was on. She's been a celebrity guest on talk shows like The View, Good Day LA, and The Today Show. I mean, this girl has been everywhere. But it has not all been a fairy tale for Jennifer, you guys. As her career and her fame and her stardom grew, Jennifer found herself victim to a host of serious challenges. She took her first drink at age 12, and that was the beginning of years of struggle with addiction and body dysmorphia and eating disorders. Yeah, it's been a long road for her. So we're going to talk about all of that with her and how she found her way through it and what she's up to now. So let's welcome Jennifer.
Thank you so much for having me, Loree. I'm so excited to be doing this. It's an honor and a privilege.
Oh, that's so sweet. We've been trying to get this together for a while now, so I am super happy that we made it work today. And I have so much that I want to cover with you. There's so much that I think I would just love, if you're cool with it, to jump in with your story of being a young teenager. I read that you were first discovered by a photographer on the Santa Monica Pier, which, by the way, I spent a lot of hours on that pier. It's a beautiful place to hang out. So is that true? And is that kind of where your career really began?
Yes, that's exactly where my career began. I guess I'll give you a little bit of a background. My family's from Argentina. I'm first generation born in America, and my parents decided to have an American child name me one of the most common names, Jennifer, and raise me back in Argentina. And where I grew up in Buenos Aires, it was all dirt roads, donkeys, and, it was different than where I grew up later on in California. And, one day, my mom and I, my little brother, we were playing at the Santa Monica Pier, and Bruce Weber, who's still one of the biggest photographers in the world today, came up to my mom and I was actually 13 years old, 2 months shy of turning 14, and he said to my mom and I that I had the right look, and he was shooting this thing for this big designer, and that he was a legit photographer. And what little girl, when they're young, doesn't want to be like Miss USA or Miss Universe or a model or something. And he asked if I could show up the next day. My mom was a little hesitant about it. And And, of course, I convinced her, manipulated my way to allowing me to show up the next day. And when I showed up, my life instantly changed. I went from growing up in dirt roads and donkeys as a young girl in Argentina to becoming a supermodel overnight. And
Wow.
we were actually shooting for Azzedine Alaïa, and who's like a very famous designer who recently passed away about a year or two ago. And Bruce, like the minute I was on set with him, I had really long hair, and he cut all my hair off. They asked if he could trim my hair, and literally I think they cut off 12 inches or something. And I had like a boy cut. And in front of the camera, he's like, "This is it. You're mine." And again, we didn't know anything. We really didn't know anything that I was diving into. And I became his girl. And I shot with him for like 3 weeks for Azzedine. And Azzedine ended up flying out at the end of the photo shoot of that camp. It's a collection book we did. And he said, if I would show up with my mom and go to Paris in a couple months and do his fashion show. And, we said yes. And at that time, there wasn't a lot of girls that were really young that were being discovered. I mean, Stephanie Seymour a few years prior to me. And, it was kind of like a big deal. And then Bruce wanted me to do a campaign with him, and I did another campaign for Italy. And then he was shooting this documentary called Let's Get Lost, a documentary on Chet Baker, who's a very famous jazz musician. And I remember moving in front of that camera and like being able to talk, and my voice mattered, and being a part of a creative team. And it was just like, it was mind blowing to me. And we shot that for a few weeks. I'd say for like 3-4 weeks. And then I flew with Bruce and my mom and a whole cast of characters to San Francisco, and I shot Calvin Klein with him. And
Wow.
We shot that it was crazy. It was like a good 3-4 months that I was Bruce's girl. And we shot that, and then my mom and I flew to Paris, and we landed in Paris, and there I was, paparazzis and cameras, and we were like, what is going on? And I ended up living with Naomi Campbell and her mom and Azzedine Alaïa and my mom. And it was just so wild because I'd worn high heels for the shoot, but I'd never really walked in heels, and I didn't even know what a fashion show really was. And the night before the show, there was every supermodel in the show. And I was like, I don't know how to walk in heels. And the girls, Naomi, Linda, Christy, Elle McPherson, Tatiana Petite, all these girls were teaching me how to walk in heels the night before.
Wow.
The show. It was so mind-blowing, yeah. And in that time, I was in... It was really surreal. I remember being there and seeing all these beautiful girls, and then we went out to dinner with all these really famous people, and Duran was there. I don't know why I'm telling you the story, but we're sitting there in Paris, and I'm like, Duran, and I had them like in my walls in my house. It was a little girl's dream come true. But we shot all these. I shot all these magazines, and one of them was the cover of American Elle, and I'm still one of the youngest girls ever on the cover of American Elle. And that September and March are the biggest issues of any fashion magazine. And I was on probably like 20, 30 magazine covers all over the world that September. It was pretty surreal.
That is surreal. I mean, that is a lot to happen in the course of less than a year for what? So by then you were 14?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I can't imagine. That's just, I mean, I'm just trying to picture myself in that situation with all of these, women, these beautiful, gorgeous supermodels, that you had probably seen yourself maybe up to that point on the covers of magazine. And then there you were with them, having them show you how to walk in high heels.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was crazy. I remember going back to public high school. I think I had like 2 weeks. I went to high school that year and the rest of that year. And I remember walking in to register for school in September. And I'm a girl. I grew up in California's West Covina. It's the San Gabriel Valley. And it was a public high school. And I remember walking in and all these people running up to me that I had known, my whole life, my, early years, and showing me my cover. And I was kind of like taken aback. I didn't know, that the magazine was out, and I didn't know that the covers were, I didn't know all that stuff. So it was kind of like very overwhelming, and I was just a little girl trying to fit in public high school, and it was, I always say I was probably a great model because I'm a great chameleon. People in recovery, I believe, in all types of recovery, are great chameleons. It's one of our survival skills, and I was really good at becoming a chameleon. I could become whoever you wanted me to. And I loved being a part of the creative process as a model. And it was like, I wore many masks. And I remember going to school and trying to fit in like a normal kid in high school, and then I'd run home and I'd be in, family dynamics of trauma and all this stuff that was going on. And then I'd be selling sex in this adult entertainment world as a model when I literally didn't even know what that was about. And my body, started developing, and I had taken, I'm in recovery. I'm over 13 years sober. January 15th is my sobriety date of 2006. And I just, I tried my first drink at 12, but I didn't know about addiction or recovery or treatment or anything like that. So the progression of my disease, led me to so many different things. But as I started developing, because I was a little girl and I was 5'6" and I'm 5'10" now. So my body started developing and I started growing and getting taller and getting hips, and I'm Latin, I'm curvy. And the fact that like modeling, it's all I know, and I'm so grateful for my journey and my destiny. But I didn't know what all that entailed. I definitely have gone through so much, in my life and in my recovery as well, and in my disease and as a model, and as a girl, like when we're supposed to learn about self-worth and dignity and integrity and things like that, it was all about the outsides. I was only as good as my next job cover or campaign. And, I was young. And so like I was saying earlier, as I started developing, my body started getting curvy and tall, and, the measuring tapes kept coming out, and, the agents would tell my mom that, to take me to, a steam room and a sauna and take me out of school and make me go to the gym. And, I couldn't get too big at the gym, but I didn't, I couldn't eat certain things. So the supermodels taught me how to eat boxes of laxatives and lettuce, and drinking, helped. And I was kind of trying different things at the time, but nothing really kind of stuck for me. But the eating disorders definitely started kicking in.
So, clearly, how could they not, with all of that, coming at you from all of those angles, and you're still so young that you're just thinking, okay, this is what I have to do now, without question about what's right and what's good for you, because you're not old enough to even know that yet. You're just like, okay, this is what I do next. And I can understand what you said a minute ago about, when you're in the modeling industry, it really doesn't matter how you feel or what you have to say or what you think. It only matters about how you look. And that's a tricky road when you're a child to navigate. It's something that, and I know this myself because I never was at the levels that you were, but I was a child model. And so I grew up from the time I was 5 doing a lot of work throughout my childhood. And you know what? It was awesome because I learned so many great things about working and work ethic and being a professional, and actually, what it means to work and then and earn a paycheck. I learned all those things from a really young age, but being in that industry, the other thing that I learned that I had to unlearn was my voice. I didn't really need to use it for anything. I just needed to show up, take direction, and look good with that toy or with that little outfit on, or whatever I was told to do. And so you're too young to understand the pros and the cons of what you're doing. And then as you get older, for you're obviously on on such a massive level, on the highest level with it. I'm too short. I didn't ever get to that level.
No.
But because I'm only like just knocking on the door of 5'4", but neither here nor there. But the point is, I get a lot of where that initially starts when you just then are a chameleon and you just can adapt to whatever environment you're in, because you learn to do it at a really young age, and then moving forward, like for you, you hit some really troubled waters. So you said that you took your first drink of alcohol around age 12.
I did. And just to go back a little bit, I want to tell you, you're absolutely beautiful. It doesn't matter how tall you are, or, how small or big or whatever it is, like, you're absolutely gorgeous. And everyone talks so highly about you. And you have you just hold yourself with such grace. So I just think it's so important for us to embrace that as well, and, with the modeling thing, that, my voice never mattered. And, it's very important to find our voices in any time, any place we are at, and I'm still yet finding my voice. I really actually would love to talk a little bit more about that later on, if you'd like, about finding our voice. And as being a woman in finding, today with all the Me Too's and all this stuff that's going on, like, I'm very independent, but I'm also, the stronger we are as women, the more people will label us. And it's me trying to not label myself, as in that category, and I work really hard at that. And again, I'm still finding my voice. And, and I think that, like, we'll always be in that process, and there's a beauty in that, and at times, like, I work with women, in treatment, or when I talk to other women, or just, on the streets and stuff, and it's like, oh, no, don't say that. Like, or, you saying that is because it's other stuff. Like, it's not stupid to ask this, or you do matter, or your opinion does matter. And for me, when I wanted to have a creative input, like, I wanted to be part of that process as a model, they said it didn't matter, and that I was just a hanger and I was always replaceable. And from the day I started modeling, I literally have been torn apart. I know every single imperfection there is about me, every angle, everything, and it's like, it's almost like it could be very damaging, and it used to be for me, I today don't strive to be super skinny or super big or super anything. I try to be super comfortable. But it's taken a lot of work. I'm not going to lie. It's taken a lot of work. And this whole aging process, like, I wish somebody gave me a book or a manual guide on the aging process, because I remember when I was younger, from my mom to everyone going, oh, just wait till you get to my age, or just wait till you get, into your 20s or 30s or 40s. And I'm in my 40s now. And it's like, oh God, no one told me what to wait for. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, they always make it sound like, there's something bad that's going to happen. Oh, you just wait. And then it's like this sort of voice of doom, like the tables are going to turn and life will cease to exist as you know it. And it's all downhill from here. It's like every decade is a mile marker. But I'll tell you what, because I am quite a bit older than you, I can tell you firsthand that it is bullshit. Every single decade, every year, every decade that has gone by, I'm like, I don't know what all the fuss was about. I feel better. I feel smarter. I feel wiser. I feel stronger. I feel more fierce every year that goes by. So I think it gets better, not diminishing. It's empowering. For me, anyway, that's been my experience. So that's what I like to share.
As you're saying that, like, I was thinking, like, in my 20s, I seriously didn't know my head from my ass. And there's nothing, I'm not knocking the 20s at all. But I was much more insecure than I am right now today. And now I'm like, oh, wow, I have, like, a muscle here. And I get very excited about it. Back in the day, I wasn't like that, I think so, too. Like, it's true. Like at 30, I was like, oh God, it's 30, it's doomsday. And, again, that goes back to my modeling days. Like, I remember as a model, they would tell me by 18, like I'm pretty much close to retirement. At 21, my life was over. I mean, literally. So I always struggled with age, and I would always lie. And then when I got into acting, they're like, "Oh, don't say you're a model." And I'm like, "How do I not say that?" Like, first of all, I'm 5'10", and second of all, people will know. Some people may recognize me from my modeling days, and then don't say your age. And I'm like, wow. And now I can't hide it because it's on Wikipedia. So I mean, I just turned 42, so I'm embracing it. I'm embracing it right now. It's sometimes I slow down though. In the morning, I feel like I need an oil change every morning in my body. I kind of need to walk it off a little bit, but I think that's the wear and tear. But I love that you said that, and I think it's so, so important, first and foremost, as a woman, for us to encourage and support each other, as that, and like as women, like we can do this, but also with men, like they go through it too, and just as human beings, we should support each other. And I think in this day and time, with everything that's going on, the only thing I can do, I can't change anything. I can't change, global warming or politics or, all the tragedy that's going on in the world, but I can definitely impact it. And I can only do it by love, and so that's what my main thing is. And you doing that to me really helps me. And I want to thank you for that.
Yes, of course. Yeah, I think you're right, though. I think it's got to start from love, which is, starts inside every individual. You can't, when people talk about movements and society and communities and culture, that's not like one big thing, but it is, but it's all made up of individual people. And that's where
it really is.
That's where, the foundational, you have to start with the individual. So I totally get what you're saying, but let's talk a minute about your journey, because people are hearing, wow, right? You started your life journey, and your troubles and challenges started before you were really even well into your teen years, and I think it's important to share that journey, and there's a lot in there that we want to talk about. So, how did you end up going from this whirlwind modeling career that started, having you globetrotting all over and gracing all of these covers of magazines, to finding yourself literally becoming an addict?
So I, in Argentina, and I always go back to this part of the story, like I've done a lot of inner work, and I'm always doing the inner work. Thank God for therapy. I still go, and I still work with mentors. I have many mentors, but I do have a sponsor that I work with as well in recovery. But I had to dig really deep, and I had to do timelines and all this stuff and try to find these where I was uniquely different. I suffer from that, and I suffer from many things like eating disorders and addiction, drugs and alcohol and mental illness as well. I suffer from depression. I just recently came out about that in the magazine, in Recovery Today magazine. I've become a writer on there, and so I've been talking about that as well. But when I grew up in Argentina, it was I remember everyone, we're very intermeshed, intertwined. Family's very important. So we would have late night dinners with a huge, pretty much the whole neighborhood. And we'd have so much food filled on the table that all the drinks were on the floor. And I just remember everyone, the more they poured, the longer the parties lasted. And I remember people drinking and having a really good time. I remember dancing with my grandparents. I remember seeing my mom and dad happy. I just remember everyone happy. And when we came back to California, when my parents realized my little brother and I would probably have more opportunities out in California, in America, than we would in Argentina, and they sacrificed everything, I started school and I spoke Spanish, so I had to learn English, and I already felt uniquely different. And my parents, they started struggling with their own problems, and God bless them, they did the best they could. And I see them not up or down anymore. I see them as human beings. And I'm grateful for everything that they've done to sacrifice for my little brother and I. And I'm grateful. I'm blessed to say that, and that I was really loved, and that I am really loved. But they had their own difficulties, and I remember 12 was just very chaotic for me. 12, I realized my parents admitted to me that they were separated and they were going to go through a divorce, and I didn't have a place to have an outlet. And I didn't realize that until a few years back. I'd say like 5 years ago, how traumatic that really was for me. And that was by doing more work, and that I kind of, thought I was the only girl in this world, in this universe, going through that, and I'd go back to school and act like everything was okay when it really wasn't. And because I believe it's actually proven fact, it's a gene, it's hereditary. I once exposed, the beast was awakened, for me. But at 12 years old, I remember I was making my brother a sandwich in the kitchen, and I looked over from the kitchen to the dining room. My parents had a liquor cabinet, and I just remember that moment going, I just want to feel like they did in Argentina, because I equated drinking to happy. And I went and I got this cup, and I poured all these different liquor bottles in there, liquor in there, and I took my first drink. And till this day, I kid you not when I tell you this, when I took that drink, my perception still tells me it felt like this. It went down into my throat, and it got into my stomach, and it was kind of warm and fuzzy, and all of a sudden it felt like it imploded inside me. And I felt like a cross between the Jolly Green Giant, Wonder Woman, and She-Ra. Like, I felt like I had arrived that moment, right? My little brother's there, and he's like, ooh, I'm telling you. And I was like, shut up. And he bribed me, and I gave him all my change, and I eventually ran out, and little jerk-off went and ratted on me that night. And my dad actually showed up that night, and my parents put me on restriction for the rest of my life. And that lasted maybe 45 minutes. And, there was never any consequences to my actions. There was never, no one taught me boundaries, or, they didn't know that, we didn't know about disease, addiction, right, like I said. And, the progression of my disease has led me to everything and anything else. I didn't become a full-fledged alcoholic overnight. It didn't happen in, a year. I mean, it may have taken some time for me, but sometimes exposed, it happens overnight for some people. But for me, it took a little bit, and I know a lot of people talk about drinking and using and saying, oh God, it's so bad. And it was bad. It ended up being traumatic for me. But at that moment, it was a relief, and drugs and alcohol saved me at times. I'm grateful for that to the point that it, led me to getting help, because I couldn't anymore. But what my drug of choice is cocaine. And when I did try that, I got to say, like, the first time I did that first line, I was hooked. For me, cocaine gave me a heartbeat like nothing else ever has. But in the end, it ended up bringing me to my knees, and it betrayed me.
Sure. So that probably, I'm guessing, the cocaine, the exposure to that must have maybe come along in your modeling career as you were a young model. Is that where you were exposed to it, or was it just through friends?
It was two models that I was at, and I was close to turning 18 years old, and I was at one of the girls' houses, and, we're drinking out of these beautiful crystal glasses of champagne. And, I was acting as if I was really good at acting as if, like I said earlier. But I all of a sudden, one of the girls brings out this white china plate. They pour all this white powder on there. They cut it all up, roll up this $100 bill, and they started snorting away. And they asked me if I wanted some, and I was like, yeah, I haven't done some in a while. I was trying to act cool.
Be cool.
I'd never tried. Yeah, it's so cool, right? I had never tried cocaine. But like I said, the minute I tried it, I was hooked. And it was on. It was game on.
Yeah. So by the time you got to that point, I just want to back up for 1 second. You actually then were already vulnerable to all of these influences because of what the story you just told with being young, and what you viewed growing up as far as the drinking and your association with that. You had already tried alcohol when you were 12, so by the time, and then you're thrust into this world, so you were kind of already really vulnerable and susceptible to all of the all of the new influences, so when cocaine came along, it was just, you were ripe and ready to become an addict for it.
Yeah, I mean, I really was. And something would have eventually got me down. I mean, they would have taken me down. I say it's cocaine, but like the first thing I did was try a drink. I'm addicted to addiction. I suffer from the isms of alcoholism. And I have to keep that in check every single day. Like, am I eating right? Am I eating too much? Am I not eating enough? Am I, shopping? Am I not shopping? Am I, acting out? Like, am I getting angry with the love of my life? Am I taking it out on him? Am I taking it out on myself? And, I'm on literally constantly always trying to figure out, like a daily reprieve, like, what am I doing? Like, do I have this in check? But one of the things, like kind of what you were talking about as a young, when you were modeling as a young girl, I didn't have any coping mechanisms. Like, no one gave me those. I had survival mechanisms, and I had responsibilities. I became the provider of my family, and, I was paying mortgages for my mom and bailing my dad out of jail and putting my brother through college and, doing all that. So with that being said, the modeling, it gave me paychecks to do that, but it also gave me, I had to sacrifice a lot, with that, I really believe that, if you don't have coping mechanisms, or you lose them along the way and you come into, survival mechanisms, there's a lot of trauma behind that, and
Sure.
Again, I didn't have a place where my voice mattered, or I was able really to talk about everything, that was happening. And I was, sometimes, my mom couldn't travel with me. I'd gone away out of state or country 33 times by the time I got my diploma. I graduated high school. And that's a lot, and there were times my mom had to stay in LA for my brother because of his schooling and stuff. And the agents would promise my mom the world, that I'd be looked after. The minute I landed, I'd be picked up and I'd live with the head agent, or, and I'd land in certain countries and I was all on my own. And at times I saw and experienced a lot of dark things. And I was too afraid to come home and tell my family because I knew they'd immediately remove me. And then my head would say, well, then who would take care of us? Because again, I felt very responsible for my family. And what I have recently learned in the last few years is that, if you come from a traumatic family or a chaotic family and you step in as a parent role or as the person that's in charge or responsible, that we tend to feel very responsible. And I know that, like, even when I go to therapy now, like, sometimes I've said to my therapist, I actually said this last year, I said, we were talking about some stuff that was going on, and it went back to childhood, and I said I could have done better for my mom, my brother, and he, at the end of this, hour session I had, he said, well, how do you feel? And I said, I feel like I failed them, my family. And he just looked at me and he said, of course you did. You were a child. You were never supposed to be in that role. And with that being said, there's a lot of healing that can come from that, because that wasn't supposed to be my role. That was something I put upon myself, and as children, we don't really necessarily know how to not walk into that role because we want to care for the ones that love us.
Right.
And in that, and it's important to be able to relate to that, and there's a moment in everyone's life that feels that, and that makes us human. And what I have learned from that is that was my past, and I'm here right now, and I'm able to embrace myself with the strength and the power that, I really have. And I say that to people listening, that you too have that. I hope that they can embrace themselves with the strength that they have, because we've been able to overcome it.
Yeah. Yes. And that's a wonderful thing to say to people, and hopefully, people listening will grab onto that and know that, it is maybe hopeless as things may have seemed. It's not. If you just allow yourself to believe that there's another way, there's another opportunity, that things can get better for you, and you are, walking representative of that.
Thank you. Yeah. When I got sober this time around, and I'm one of those that was, I we can get into that part of the story, but when I got sober, I remember, I turned people blue in the face for the first year or two. I was like, oh, I want to use, I want to die, I want to use, I want to die, and I didn't believe. And I remember there's a group of people that would say, kid, just believe that we believe. And till this day, once in a great while, I'll call them and I'll say, just tell me you believe. Like I have to believe that you believe, because I'm still really young in recovery. 13 years is a great accomplishment, over 13 years, but it's just a lot of days, a lot of yesterdays put together. Today's a new day for me. It's a new day. I've never been sober on this date, and I've never been sober this long. So for me, it gets very overwhelming still.
Sure. Yeah. So you were, late 20s, early 30s when you got sober, when you first started?
This last time I was 28 or 20. Oh, yeah, 28.
Okay.
20. So, I was going to turn 29 that year.
Okay. So what was your realization? What was the wall that you hit, or what was your turning point, your going rogue story that made you go, I have to stop this. I have to do something different?
Well, it's okay. So that's a good question. I feel like there's been moments in my life that I have a few going rogue moments, but this last time around, I had switched careers. I got into acting, and my first movie is a movie called Blow. It's my breakout role besides the Chet Baker movie. But I got a lot of recognition for that. And then I did Vanilla Sky and Sweetest Thing and Corky Romano. And the thing was, I wasn't very outspoken. I wasn't outspoken at all about my recovery or my addiction. And yet again, I was at the top of my game. And I was... I was back in Vogue, cover of Details, Allure, all this stuff, the new It Girl in Hollywood and all these movies. And, I just couldn't stay sober. And I had a little bit of time at that point. I gotten sober yet again. And I probably had about a year and a half, 2 years sober. And I relapsed. And I know my best friend, Brandy Glanville, who was on The Housewives, her and my mom came to me and said that I needed to go to treatment. And at that point, in that 11 months that I had relapsed, my world got really dark really quick. I ended up in my shoebox, in my shoe closet. I had disconnected my jaw in a gacked out moment. My nose would just bleed profusely, and they came to me with my jaw disconnected, nose bleeding, and just like a wreck. And they said I needed to go to treatment. I literally looked at them and I said, treatment's for fucking losers. And excuse my language. And meanwhile, I live like this, and they were like, we can't watch you die like this. You got to give yourself a shot. And I don't know if anyone's ever had people come to them and said they needed some help of any kind. Well, that day didn't go very well. Sometimes they don't go very well. And I lost it. And I went on a 2-week run, and then I just, in my head, I could hear them, and I went, fine. I'll go to treatment. I'll go for 5 days. It was under my terms. I needed to sleep and eat anyways, and I was going to have those two women shut up, in my head. That's how I thought it. And I checked into treatment. I went to this place called Los Encinas in July 12th, 2005. And I was going for 5 days, and I ended up staying from July 12th until July 12th of 2005 to April 30th of 2006. I did relapse in treatment. It was quite overwhelming for me. And when I checked back in on January 15th, that was the day that there was a couple days later, I actually surrendered. But when I checked in, my sobriety date is January 15th. And I went into the psych ward because I thought I was buying an 8-ball of Coke a day. My dealer had me hooked on heroin, speed, horse tranquilizer, rat poison, name it, it was in there. And they had to detox me in the psych ward in order to detox off of the off of the opiates with narcotics. And I AMA'd 10 weeks prior. So I just looked at them and I said, whatever. And when I went into that psych ward that day, I just remember the double doors slamming shut and all that from the locks. And there's a line friends and family couldn't cross. And I saw this one guy, and he was in a chair, and his eyes were rolling back, and he was drooling. And this guy was screaming, and it was this hallway, and it felt like forever. But it felt like the longest hallway ever, but it was probably not. I don't remember fully, but he was being tackled by two techs because he was trying to run down the corridor naked. God bless him. And I just went, what happened to me? You know, how did me of all people, get here, right? Yeah. And I just thought, like, oh my God, like, I mean, I literally felt like dead woman walking. And my room was the last room on the left at the end of the hallway. And the tech walked me, and they knew me because I'd been there from July 12th, and now it's January 15th. And I sat on the bed, and he said, you know, I got to go get the rest of the assessment paper and the med sheet. And I said, I need to go to the restroom anyways. And when I went to the restroom, you know, in psych wards, they take away shoelaces, plastic, any sharp object you can hurt yourself or anyone else away from you. And when I got up from going to the restroom, I realized they forgot the belt. And just like that, I started looking up. There was no door connecting to the bathroom to the bedroom. And so I started seeing all these objects on the ceiling. I got on top of one of the beds. I put my belt through one of the objects. I secured it. And then I put my neck through there. And the last thing I remember were my feet were dangling. You know, I hung myself, and everything went black. And when I came to, I was in a 5-point strap. There was a nurse sitting on my side singing Hush Little Baby. And her name was Nurse Bell, I remember. And I guess I was screaming in that time at some point. But because of the fixation, I had a lot of complications. I couldn't speak. It took me 3 months to form sentences again. My brain works perfectly. I shook profusely, my hands and my legs. That took 9 months to dwindle down. I would get up and I'd say to myself, and from my head, you know, my brain, I'd say, right foot move, and I would fall. I was in a wheelchair. From a wheelchair, I went to a walker. I went to a cane, and then I freely learned to walk. That took about 5 months or so. I had no control of my bodily functions. I peed and pooed myself, so they put me in Depends. I like to call them diapers. I would throw up on myself from detoxing profusely. So I was covered in pee and poo, and it was just horrible. And my brain worked perfectly, you know, and nothing connected. And I remember it was about 2 or 3 days later, I was in the wheelchair by a window, and I was holding onto the bars, and there was a window. I could crack it open like a quarter of an inch, and people were going to groups or meetings and stuff, and somebody was telling a joke, and I could hear everyone laughing. I could smell their smoke, hear this chatter, and feel this feeling that I literally couldn't understand. And I said in my head to God, I said, God, is it humanly possible for a girl like me to ever feel what they're feeling? And if so, I'll go to any length. And I kid you not, that woman, when I talk about it, that girl in that wheelchair that day still resides inside of me. You know, that was I probably going rogue, hopeless, like somehow something needs to change moment. And then there was a few more throughout the years of my recovery.
Yeah. Oh, girl, I can't even pretend to try to imagine what that hell was like. I don't even have words. And to feel like such a prisoner in your body. I mean, like you said a couple of times, your brain was working, fully functioning, but it's like it was almost disconnected from your body. It's like your body just totally, completely malfunctioned on every level. And that must have been the most, I don't know, bizarre, horrible, crazy, unimaginable thing to be stuck in that position. And it must have seemed like an eternity.
It did. I've never had anyone say that before to me. It did. It felt like I was, like, as you're saying that, it felt like I was in a glass box, you know, and I was just like, you guys, get me out of here, you know, and I literally stuttered. It would take me about a minute and a half to say, like, am I going to be like this forever? And the doctors would look at me deadpan and say, maybe. You know, and I was like, oh my God, this is the hell that I created. You know, and when I look back now, it's the hell that my disease created.
Right.
You know, and that's how powerful it is. I think from that moment on, like I wanted people to there was something in me that, wow, I've never said this before. I don't even know why it's coming out, but there's something in me that wanted to prove everyone that that's what I felt like. That's who I was, and I didn't matter in some way if I really dig deep inside of it. I have never said that out loud. Like this monster, this person that was like, couldn't, just disheveled in every way possible.
That's
wow, that's pretty deep for me
insight.
right now. Thank you for that realization.
That's all you, girl. That's all you. That's just so fascinating. So do you think that your going rogue shifts, one of them, all of them, some of them, do you think part of that transitioning for you, that transformation began when you actually decided to lean into God, to a spiritual resource, and you asked for help?
I think so, because when I relapsed in treatment, I remember going to try. I was buying all this amount of drugs and cocaine. I thought, like I said, and I was thinking about groups, and I was thinking about Dr. Drew. He happened to be one of my doctors, and I was thinking about his dumb little smirk he does, which I actually love now. But back then, it was like, oh. And I was thinking about one of the counselors was Bob Forrest, who was on Celebrity Rehab with me. And I was thinking about his like hat and his shade of red hair he had and what shade it was. And I was thinking about like the people there and if they're still there. And, there was a part of me that wanted to be part of the process, and wanted to be part of, but yet couldn't feel that and wouldn't allow myself to completely surrender. And when I had that moment, that gift of desperation, I realized it was done and that I needed the help. When I went back into treatment that day, like I knew I couldn't do it alone. So I remember that I remember as you asked me this question. I remember I couldn't do it alone and that they could do it for me, and I think treatment is incredible for people who need it. I don't believe everyone needs it. I do believe some people do. A lot of people these days actually need it. I needed that structure. I needed that care. I needed people to tell me what to do, how to do it, when to do it, how to feel, when to feel, to define those things, and I always say that like when the going gets tough for me, I go back to that structure. When the going gets great for me, I go right back to that structure. I try to keep it even keel today.
Yeah.
And that helped me a lot, because instead of saying, I feel like shit, I feel bad, I feel this, I feel that, like the same things over and over again, I really got to discover things, and it took quite some time for me to discover it.
Right.
There's been a few more going rogue moments for me. And I started believing, like I said, that other people believed. I just let them run the show, and in that time, when I first originally went to treatment, I didn't know I was pregnant, and I had to go through a forced miscarriage in treatment. And a few months later, it was the end of October. I wasn't feeling good that whole process, like all those months from July, from when that happened until it was August that it happened, that I found out the end of July or so. And the end of October, I wasn't feeling good, and I kept asking to let me go to my doctor in LA, and I went. And my doctor told me I was still carrying that baby that was now dead inside me. And my HCG levels were really high. And I was like, I had another 10 days to live or so. And he had to do an emergency DNC that day. And that day, he decided to do it with no sedation. And I saw and felt everything. But now I had a little bit of time under my belt, like a couple, I had some, a good from July to the end of October. I started feeling feelings. And I remember when I laid on that table, I felt. It felt like the first time. I felt that cold table. I felt what I was laying on. I felt what was going on. I felt about my poor mother, how I made her suffer, and my dad and my poor brother and my careers and how I lost them all and everything, my friends and just, all this stuff. And it was just too overwhelming, and I saw what it was happening to me at the same time. And I went back to treatment. I told them what had happened, and it was just too real. And with that, I relapsed a couple of days later, and And then when I came back, I just went, oh God, like I just need them to guide me. And when I got out of treatment, I did that. I said I was going to do the aftercare plan and all that. And I needed to get my life back, and I went back to LA and I had no game left in me. Like all I did was contemplate suicide and using every single day. And finally at 9 months sober, my sponsor said, I can't enable you into a grave, but I can help you if you're willing to go to any lengths the program way. And I asked her what that looked like. And she said, I need to go back into sober living and put my life in storage. I had made millions. I blew every dollar. I only had enough for about a month and a half of sober living. I looked at her and I was like, now what? She goes, you're going to dig deep. Get ready to dig deep. We're going to get pen and paper and we're going to work really hard. And she said, you're going to go to meetings. You're going to show up 15 minutes early. You're going to go out and fellowship afterwards. You're going to take a bunch of commitments. You're going to go into women's groups and you're going to get sober where I got sober in Crenshaw 96 in the hood. And I got to tell you, those people in those meetings saved my life. I ended up going and staying in people's houses, on their couches, in their spare bedrooms, in their guest homes, at my mom's house. And I pretty much went homeless. And that was like yet another road moment. And it was so, now that I look back, it was like a burden was lifted, and I was still like a little, self-righteous and a little bit of an ass. And I'd go to those meetings and I would always like raise my hand. And, in the hood meetings, it'd be like, oh, look what the pretty little princess has to say, what it was like. And they'd be like, sit down, shut the F up and, listen. And they're like, all was what it was like just follow us. And, I'd be like, whatever, toothless people meeting, and they would like, it was crazy.
Yeah.
And I got to tell you, those people.
Yeah. I wanted to just like make this, I had this thought before I lose it that, this whole thing that you had to do of surrendering to other people helping you, surrendering to structure, surrendering to guidance, you had to completely, you had to completely do something that you were not groomed to do when you were young. It was the opposite. You said you had no real structure. You had no real guidance. In fact, it was the opposite. You were the one that had to manage everything, around your life and your family's life because you thought that was survival. And you had to go out and be the one to create that and to make, have the resources, generate the resources to keep everybody alive and moving forward. So it seems like that was something that you actually had to unlearn, to let go of those responsibilities and that burden and give it up to someone else that knew better for you now at this point in your life or when you were there.
100%. 100%. And that's exactly what I say. Those, as I call them, toothless people, they saved my life. They rebirthed me. They really did. And like, I'm eternally grateful for them. I get so emotional when I talk about it. They brought me up and they, and some of those people I still talk to. They're my towers, they literally restructured me. And when I had no structure, you're absolutely right with what you're saying. And it was a reversal for me. It was like a reverse. And like, I had to learn all the things I didn't know. And I had to change all the things I knew to not know them. You know what I mean? And,
yeah.
And it's been an interesting journey on that level, and there were things that weren't necessarily in the program that I had to do. So I have incorporated many different things. And like my sponsor wouldn't let me watch like tabloid TV or look at magazines or look in the mirror too long. I'd get out of the shower, I'd have 15 minutes to shower and change, and kind of, if I did anything, I had to go to meetings like with my face or anything, but I had to go to meetings with my hair pulled back in a bun or a ponytail. I had to wear t-shirts. I had to wear jeans or leggings and flats. I always had to feel grounded. I couldn't be on my phone when I was in meetings. I couldn't do any of that stuff. And, that day when my sponsor said she couldn't enable me anymore if I wanted to do the program way, she said, you'll always, she asked me, she said, is it humanly possible for you to believe in something bigger than yourself? And I was like, I guess. She's like, good. And she goes, you'll never lack. And I got to tell you, Loree, there has not been one day that I've ever lacked. ever in my sobriety. I may have not gotten what I wanted, but I've never lacked. I've always had a roof over my head, a pillow to sleep on, and food on my plate. And I couldn't date. I couldn't be in a relationship for a year. That lasted about 11 months and 13 days. Not that I was counting. But I couldn't hug men. That was 6 months. It really lasted 8.5. I was at a meeting one time. There's this old timer. He's in a wheelchair, and he said, "Come over here, kid, hug me." And I hugged him. And my sponsor happened to have been there, and she gave me that look, that some women sometimes can give you, like, "What the hell are you doing?" And I looked at her. I'm like, "What's the matter, sponsor?" And she's like, "You hugged a man." I was like, "I know, but he's 90 and dying." And she's like, "But your problem is you hug him like you want to fuck him. Like you use your sensuality instead of your sexuality, instead of your brains, your skills. Let me teach you how to use your words, your mouth, your intelligence, let me teach you how to use this." And I today can hug men and not use my sexuality or my sensuality. I don't need that for validation anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think that just by a certain way, like my looks matter. My looks for me, like I want to feel the best I am, but it's not the most important.
Right.
I want to have that foundation. By not looking in the mirror and digging really deep and uncovering, discovering, and discarding, it got really uncomfortable. It got really, really uncomfortable. So much so that because of the pregnancy and then the miscarriage and then the D&C afterwards, my hormones shutting down and all the digging deep within my soul to find my soul, I gained a lot of weight. I gained over 120 pounds. I've lost over 140. So I went from anorexia to obesity. And I literally was pulling a size 18. I was 267 pounds at my heaviest. And I just remember it was at year two, they were doing a birthday dinner for me that day for my sobriety birthday. And I got all these calls from all these old timers and my sponsees at the time, and they were all congratulating me. And I was like, I think I'm going to go. Like, everything always shrunk. I don't know why, but in my head, like, all my clothes shrunk. It was just I was getting bigger. And my scale was always broken. And I was like, I'm going to go buy a new outfit. And that day I went, and I went to the Victoria's Secret place, and this hot Victoria's Secret lady that worked there, I was like, "Excuse me, could you measure me? I think I gained a little bit of weight." And she just looked at me with disgust and was like, "We don't make your size. Try Lane Bryant." And I just looked at her like, "Oh, what?" And like, I remember I started crying when I left there, and I went home and I weighed myself, and that was 267. And I looked in the mirror, and I went, "Oh my God." And I was like touching my body, going like, what happened? As I'm looking in the mirror, like I was in this, what I would call a fat suit, like I couldn't believe that was really me. But then I started hearing the voices, but they were the good voices now, like of everyone who had called me that day, like congratulating me and loving me. And, and like I started crying first, like, me. And then I heard all that, and I just went, oh my God. And at that moment, I realized that I was loved for who I was.
Yeah.
Not for what I look like,
Right.
And
what a good thing that you had to go through that. Otherwise, you may not have had that realization that your ability to be worthy and valuable and loved had nothing to do with looking model perfect.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember in that moment after I said, like, oh my God, why me? And I just went, thank you. And I looked at that weight because I realized that weight protected me from everyone, and most of all from myself, and it was that layer, that I needed. It was my armor. And wow, I'm so emotional over it.
Yeah, no, that's it's a place for you. It's an emotional soft spot, and we need to have those. That's it's good. It's meaningful. It's meaningful.
Yeah.
And
it really is. The journey, the 2.5 years, like the 2.5 year mark was my other road moment, and 5 year mark I had it too, and at 7, and then last year I had it. So like I've had these crazy, like not crazy, but these like huge, like, rogue moments, as I call them. They really are. So there's been a few of them, and yet I think it's because we're always evolving. I always want to be like a moving forward motion. Life is always going that way. I can choose to either stay stuck or move forward, and I've chosen that destiny of moving forward. So 2 was a big year for me. And I called Hollywood a chapter. I moved out of LA. I thought it was Egypt. It was just an hour outside of LA. I was unemployable because my sponsor said, that day at 9 months sober, I'm going to go back to that 9 months. She said, if you can believe in something bigger than you won't lack. And I never did. And I was unemployable. And at 2.5, they said it was time for me to get a job. And I was like, what? And this is that aha moment, I think, at that, from the 2-year mark, from the wait to that. And I was like, well, I really like being involved in recovery. And my sponsor was like, you got to get a job. I'm like, where am I going to go? And she was like, I need you to apply somewhere. I don't care. And at the top of her head, she said, Starbucks and Target. And I looked at her and I said, what the fuck am I going to give them? A headshot and a resume? Like, I have no job skills. Like, I had none, whatsoever. And she said, well, faith without works is dead. Why don't you write down who you want to be and what you want to do? Oh, and dream big. And I looked at her and I was like, I feel the humility, yo. Like, you don't need to keep rubbing it down our face. She goes, do the work. And I wanted to always, like, there was a part of me that wanted to prove the program wrong. And I was like, fine, I will. And I shot for the moon because she told me to dream big. And I wrote down 85 things. And I wrote down things like, I want to make a difference. I want to stand for something. I want to be an advocate. I want to be back on TV. I want to be in magazines. I want to be a provider for my family. I want to be a businesswoman. And out of those 85 things, I want a huge platform, like all that stuff. And I have those 2 sheets in my nightstand. And every year on January 15th, I look at them. And now out of those 85, 45 of them have come true. And with that, all I say is be careful what you ask for because it will come.
Yeah, it's true, especially when you write it down. Okay, well, that is all we have time for today with Jennifer. Wow, what a story so far. Oh my God, she's amazing. But there is just a lot more wisdom coming from her. And so make sure that you check back next week for part 2 of my interview with Jennifer Gimenez. I hope that you love what you heard today. And please give me a rating and leave your comments. I'd love to hear them. Subscribe if you haven't already. And if you are trying to make some shift happen in your life and you would like to find out what coaching is all about with me, you can find me on all of the social media platforms or go to the website, LoreeBischoff.com or We'reTalkingShift.com. Thank you for listening, everybody. And I look forward to hanging out with you next week. Until then, stay feisty, my friends, and go make some shift happen. It goes for you too, Gary V.
The preceding podcast was a TJ DeSantis production. Comments, questions, and inquiries can be directed to DeSantisProd@gmail.com.